Hello and welcome to the session on educational system in medieval India. Educational system in general. The term medieval comes from the Latin meaning middle age and is introduced into English by 19th century. The period of introduction, or rather separation as medieval and modern, witnesses a heightened expression in art, history and literature despite of their continuity with the Middle Ages. Regarding the commencement of medieval period, there are differences of opinion. Some scholars believe that the period starts from 5th century AD and ends up by 15th century AD. Some others argue that medieval period is from 8th century AD to 18th century. The general consensus among scholars is that the period begins with the rise of the Roman Empire and ends with the period of Renaissance or the age of discovery. The educational system in the medieval period was flourished with the patronage of kings, landlords, local rulers and communities. There were formal and informal institutions to teach students. Schools known as pathashalas, maktabs, were run by not only families or religious institutions, but also by individuals known as guru or mullahs. Pathashalas belong to Hindu educational system and maktabs belong to Muslim educational system. The individual teachers were paid by cash and kinds such as food, cloth and oil. Apart from learning, students were engaged in other courses of helping their teacher and his family. These duties extended up to doing all kinds of services to the teacher's family, carrying his luggage during travel, carrying the palanquin in which the teacher travels, etc. The punishments given by the teachers were severe and students were expected to follow strict discipline with utmost obedience. Functioning of the schools was monitored by the patrons of the institutions concerned. The children of the kings, local rulers and rich people were taught separately by individual tutors engaged at their home. Students were taught arithmetic, grammar, logic, astrology, art, polity, little bit of astronomy and a little bit of Vaidyam, traditional medical practice, along with stories that bears ethical advices. Generally, the educational system of medieval India was termed as religious education, even though other subjects were also included in the teaching package. Hindus and Muslims have separate educational institutions, but admitting Hindu students in Muslim institutions and vice versa were not rare. After the completion of this education, a student is equipped to take the day-to-day responsibility in his her life. A student can also go for higher studies in any of the subjects she is interested in, the specialized schools in Takshila, Nalanda, etc. From there, one can be a good grammarian or logician or physician or astrologer. There were also individual teachers specialized in each of the subjects to provide their service to the needy students. But selection of students were also determined by the caste hierarchy existed in the society at that time. Lower caste students were not permitted to attend the upper caste educational spaces. Women's presence was less in most of the specialized subjects meant for higher studies. Their mobility in terms of leaving their home for higher studies was generally restricted. In spite of this drawback, the merit of these educational systems were their adaptability to local environment and economic conditions. Teaching in the elementary stage was through mnemonic devices such as reiteration, memorization, and also through writing alphabets on sand using the forefinger of a student. Using a body part, forefinger, directly for writing on the sand is meant to ingrain the alphabets in the mind of the student and increasing her memorization process. At a later stage of education, palm leaves were used for preserving the written knowledge. Pointed metal nails were used as stylus for writing on palm leaves. Palm leaf manuscripts. A series of processes are required to make palm leaf manuscripts, which were equivalent to modern books. Palm leaves, after being cut in the required size, generally rectangular in shape, were boiled in water to the required temperature in order to make them soft. The softened leaves, after drying, were pressed, polished, and sized. Then holes were made on either sides of the leaf with a red hot wire. A cord was passed through the holes to hold the leaves together. Two wooden planks were placed above and below the leaves to protect it as a book-like thing for future usage. These books in the medieval period were known as manuscripts or grantham. When the written words become dusty and unclear in the course of time, the alphabets were wiped with lemongrass oil in order to make them clear. Writing on palm leaf needs skill and accuracy. Common man cannot easily write on palm leaf. People who are experts in writing were known as scribes. In other words, scribes were the people who are specialized in writing, and not all people were writers, though they learn and memorize things and many kinds of knowledge. There are different methods of writing. In South India, the most common method to write on palm leaf is incision with a pointed metal stylus. After incision, to make the letters visible, lampblack or coal powder mixed with oil would be applied on the leaves. Alternatively, fresh green leaves of some particular trees would also be rubbed on the palm leaves to render the writing visible. In the second method, writing would be done with specially prepared ink. A quill or specially prepared brush would be used as a pen to write. Different scripts were used in different regions for teaching and writing. Some of the prominent scripts used for learning are Pali, Brahmi, Urdu, Persian, Arabic, Sanskrit, and Tamil. Hindu system of education. The institutionalization of education in India had happened with a Jainist and Buddhist influence. In the 5th and 6th century AD itself, there were Jainist and Buddhist system of education. The Buddhist monks were wandering people, and they had provided itinerant teaching for lay people and systematic learning for Buddhist monks through monasteries or viharas. For the latter people, disciplines of the monastic order or the Sangha, discourses of the doctrine, and advanced philosophical ideas were taught. For the layman, teaching was provided through stories, implicit with moral and ethical ideas. For both the group, teaching was given in spiritual exercises and philosophical ideas. There were also individual gurus who taught students at their residences. The Buddhist, Jainist, Brahmanic educational systems, and that meant for different castes, are generally termed as the Hindu system of education. There were different schools in general in the Hindu system of education. They were the Gurukula schools or tolls, the temple schools, the Agrahara village schools. The Gurukula upholds private teacher system where the teacher had a direct personal relationship with each student. The place was generally in a guru's house. The character, ideals, and ethics of the people were developed or shaped by the guru through his day-to-day presence, way of living, and influence. Sometimes the classes were also conducted under a tree. Talls were run in thatched mud huts and were more formal kind of institution with 20-25 disciples or students. They were financially supported by the regional or local landlords. Subjects of instruction include grammar, literature or poetry, philosophy, astronomy or Jyotisha, arithmetic, etc. The temple schools were inspired from the Buddhist monasteries and universities. There had been a large number of temples through which huge financial transactions had taken place. They had supported education of the local people by providing space, teacher, and philosophical inputs. The temple schools had flourished in the 10th century AD. For instance, the Vedic College at Ennairam in South Arcot district was established in the 11th century AD. This college had offered free boarding, lodging, and tuition to around 350 students. The institution had provided salary for 16 teachers and some allowance for each student. In the 13th century AD, the Thiruvariyur temple in the Chengalpet district was a prominent center for linguistic studies and grammar learning. In Agrahara village schools, the teachers were scholarly Brahmins specialized in different branches of knowledge. These schools were mainly meant for upper caste students, and the entry of lower caste was restricted to these places. In Hindu system, the elementary education was imparted through pathashalas, which were existed in all villages and in towns. The patrons were the rulers, chieftains, landlords, village communities, scholars, and rich people. Pathashalas were held in the veranda of the house of Guru. It was also held under a big tree. Temple premises were also used to teach students. No particular institutionalized buildings were used to run pathashalas. They were conducted as per the availability of building in each localities and had an adaptable nature. No specific fee was charged from students, but the parents who can afford something give money, gifts, rice, oil, etc. to the teachers. Students were required to render their personal service to the teachers in a day-to-day basis or whenever called for by the teacher. There were 4 stages of education at the elementary stage. 1. Writing letters of the alphabet on sand. 2. Teacher wrote on palm leaves and the students traced over them with charcoal ink. 3. Memorizing numbers and multiplication tables in the form of verses. 4. Writing and pronouncing compound sentences, equations, etc. Arithmetic was a compulsory subject since it is essential for the day-to-day transactions in life. Literature was included, but not as literature as we knew it now, but as epics and moral stories. Verse was a fundamental form used in teaching and learning. This is also a strategical move to help students in remembering complex formulas, morals, combinations of sentences, grammatical rules, medicinal properties, etc. This basic form also helps the student in recalling the learned knowledge easily at a later stage in their life. The main objectives of Hindu education are preparing the students for the existing world, equipping the students for a vocation, preparing individuals for administrative services, imparting moral and ethical ideas in life, providing basic knowledge to enable the student for higher studies. Vedic learning is another form of education in which the student has an opportunity to study the Vedas and at a later stage the Vedangas or the end of Vedas. This is termed as pure religious education. Muslim system of education. With the advent of Mohammedan rulers in India, their influence had reflected in the field of education. The institutions for education of Muslim community in the medieval India were divided into mosques, khanqahs or Sufi centers, dargahs, maktabs and madrasas, along with private teachings of individuals. Private teachers imparted elementary education, whereas mosques or other religious places instructed further knowledge with religious education. Beginners learn alphabets, pronunciation, punctuation, reading and writing. Maktabs and madrasas are meant for secondary and higher level of education. Both the institutions may either attached with mosque or run independently with the help of local patrons or rulers. The teachers, known as Maulavis, are in charge of the maktabs. The objective of this education was to train ulamas or scholars and make them capable to do the duties of civil service, administration and law. The first madrasa was established by Sultan Iltutmish in Delhi. It is named as Madrasa-e-Muizzi after the name of Muizzuddin Muhammad Ghori. In Muhammad bin Tughlaq's period, there were thousands of madrasas only in Delhi. Madrasas were set up in big towns and small villages. The eminent scholars teach in the modern centers located near the Sultanate or major cities. In the medieval period, education was also imparted through Sufi centers or khanqahs. This type of education was promoted mainly during the Khilji dynasty period. During this period, a tremendous progress was seen in the learning of theology, lexicography and exegetic writing. Learning in Greco-Arab medicine also flourished during the period of Khiljis. Learned men from Arabia, Persia and Central Asia were invited to teach the students of all the above mentioned educational institutions. Even though the education in the medieval period was known as religious education, subjects other than religion were also taught there. Generally, the main subjects taught in madrasas were tafsir, hadith, fiqh. Besides these religious subjects, logic, grammar, medicine, astronomy and literature were also taught in madrasas. Later, arithmetic, geometry, mensuration, attaching numbers to phenomena according to certain rules, agriculture, moral classes, polity and politics were included for teaching. Art and literature was also part of the subjects. Importance was also given for the well-defined norms of behavior, pattern of thought and the ethical development of the characters of a people. Philosophy was divided into physics and metaphysics based upon Aristotelian principle of the Greeks. The teacher was respected as the most knowledgeable person. Questioning of the teacher was not possible in any of the medieval educational system, such as Muslim education and Hindu education. The practice of living with a teacher was not as common with a Muslim as it was in the case of Brahmanic and Buddhist education. Punishments given by the teachers were severe. Truants and delinquents were caned and slapped. The madrasas and maktabs were financially supported through grant-in-aid system, either by the rulers of the Mughal dynasty or by the local landlords. The grants given to the ulamas or scholars are known as Madad-e-Maash. The rulers helped in the spread of the education. They built educational institutions and universities and supported them through grants. The learned men were patronized by most of the rulers of the Mughal dynasty. Generally, they did not interfere in the management of educational institutions and in deciding the curriculum of the institutions. In Muslim educational system, writing alphabets on sand was not seen. They used palm leaves with knife or nails as stylus for this purpose. The main scripts used were in Urdu, Persian and Arabic. A new script named Arabi Malayalam had developed in Kerala by the end of the medieval period, in which the script was Arabic and the language was Malayalam. The main objectives of Muslim education are mentioned below. A. Developing love for Muslim culture and religion. B. Enabling the individual for Islamic life. C. Preparing the students for the existing world. D. Equipping the students for a vocation. E. Preparing individuals for administrative services. F. Imparting moral and ethical ideas in life. Educational institutions for higher studies. People who are intended to go for higher studies in grammar, philosophy, medicine, astronomy, etc., had a choice to go out of their region and joined in any of the higher educational institutions established in various places. The well-known educational institutions meant for higher studies were Nalanda and Takshila. The Sanskrit name for Takshila is Takshashila. They were centers meant for the study of art, culture, medicine, philosophy and politics. Both the places were famous centers of Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana means greater vehicle, and the proponents hoped to become bodhisattvas or saints who have become enlightened but postponed this nirvana for the betterment of the human beings. The clear separation amongst science, medicine, astronomy could not be seen in the medieval education. Physical science was part of philosophical studies. Method of mastering in each subject includes debates and discussion based on an art of Nyaya or Tarkashastra. Medicine or medical science largely derived from the Samkhya and Nyaya Vaisheshika tradition. Surgery was part of the indigenous medical science during the medieval period, but declined gradually in the course of time. Nalanda. Originally, Nalanda was a center of Brahmanic learning. It was familiar for a significant debate that had taken place between the Buddhist logician Dinaga and the Brahmin scholar Sudurjaya. Under the patronage of Gupta emperors, the university flourished as a secular space of learning. It was stated that 7 halls and 300 rooms were provided for the holding of classes. Takshila. Buddhist influences enhanced the reputation of Takshila from a private teacher managed school to a state managed and well organized educational institution. By 7th century AD, when the traveler Huansang visited Takshila, it was in its ruins. Technical education. Technical education had flourished during the medieval period by sharing the knowledge from many other countries such as Arabia and Persia. During the Mughal period, India was famous for its thin silk production. High quality products such as painted and enameled wares, cups and basins, steel guns, knives, paper, gold and silver ornaments and cotton were produced because of the backup of a highly developed technical training. Technical education had been given through the artisan cum apprentice system and through manufacturing, establishments called karkhanas. Technical skills were also acquired through traditional family trainings. A student learned the skills gradually by observing and participating in different levels of the making of a product, since the learning had happened in their family setup. Let me summarize the session. In this section, we have looked at the different aspects of medieval educational system in India. There were different types of educational institutions for the Muslim and Hindu communities. Education had been imparted through individual teachers and institutions such as temples, mosques and pathshalas. Maktabs and madrasas were the Muslim educational institutions, whereas temples, tolls and agraharam schools were the Hindu educational institutions. Education was meant for the betterment of an individual, for getting occupation and for improving the ethical and moral life of people. Technical education was not taught as a separate subject, but was given through apprenticeship. Students who want to be specialists in select subject had been an opportunity to go for higher studies in places such as Nalanda and Takshila. Now, you can try to answer the questions given here. What were the subjects taught in the educational system of medieval period? What do you mean by a manuscript or grantham? Describe the features of the Hindu educational system in medieval India. What were the 4 stages of learning in the elementary level of education? What were the facilities for higher education? Now, you can go through these books for reference. Education in Medieval India by Ray Krishnalal, B.R. publication, New Delhi, 1934. Education in South India, Ancient and Medieval Periods by Gurumurthy S., New Era, Madras, 1979. Hope that you have enjoyed the session. We can meet again with another topic. Till then, take care.